Hi guys, so here we are at the end of a hellish day. It's dark outside. I'm feeling haggard, but let's talk about developing ideas and thinking perceptively. 2 instructions we give our students, our senior students, when they are writing, and that sometimes, a lot of the time, they don't really understand. Let's get into it. Okay, so a bit of background. When I came back I did 3 years in Abu Dhabi, and I came back in 2012, and in that time the education system had changed. We had a thing called NCEA, and we had new standards, and we had also new teacher jargon. So I would often get my colleagues to moderate my students' writing, because I wasn't really sure of what those descriptors meant for the achievement criteria. Now, often the feedback was, the student needs to develop their ideas. They need to add details. They need to think perceptively. And I go, okay. And then I go away and think, I actually don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means. So if I tell the students to develop their ideas, are they going to know what that means? Probably not. So we have to imagine that we are 16, 17, and we're told that. What does that even mean when my brain is stressing about what I'm going to wear to the party tonight? So let's look at the 2 crucial things: developing your ideas and thinking perceptively. So developing your ideas is we often say to the kids as well, students, add details. As I mentioned before, add more details. So what does that mean? For me, the way I've sort of unpacked it so that I can understand, developing your ideas, adding details, is about the describe and the explain side of things. So reasonably basic. It's just getting down what you know. It's showing what you know. But sometimes that involves a bit of thinking, right? And a bit of delving. So what could students do to develop their ideas? I'll run through this list. It's in the blog. I'll link it below. So first thing is drawing on the senses. Now, by the way, this list can be, I'll let you decide what's more formal writing, what's more creative writing, but develop the senses and can actually be used for both types of writing. So what do the students see? Or people, whoever they're talking about, what do they see? What do they hear? What do they feel emotionally as well as physically? What do they smell and taste even? So for creative writing, that actually opens up a whole figurative world, doesn't it? But for formal writing, it engages the reader and it makes the writing less flat. So don't discount slightly creative sides of things for formal writing either. Now, moving on from that is describe things, describe people, describe situations, describe places, describe objects. How do you do that? Go back to the senses. That's a fantastic starting point. Excuse me, told you it was the end of the day. I've lost my voice. Mention who is involved, who is creating this situation, who is affected by this. So sometimes we forget about the different parties involved, so they could mention who. Cite an authority, prove that you're not the only one that's thinking this, right? And in line with that, of course, is bring in some facts and statistics, bring in some examples. So we're talking research now. So that's a great way of bringing in details, developing your ideas. Provide an anecdote. Now, what I love about anecdotes is it actually helps bring that personal voice out. So it's the student's anecdote. It helps bring out their personal voice. It shows passion for the subject, interest in the subject, empathy for the situation perhaps. So it's actually more than providing another form of example. It's a great way on a higher level to engage the audience. What else have I got here? Give background details. how did we get to this point? How did this character, how did this person, how did this planet get to this point? So adding those details, explaining that. Provide comparisons. So you can go down the figurative route, even in formal writing. Okay. You can also provide contrast, right? So comparison, contrast. You're comparing, contrast, opposites. Also help to explain a point. And of course, analogies. Brilliant. So you're helping your reader understand. Right. For a live presentation, you could have students harness the power of the prop or visual aids such as graphs and photos and things, of course. At the end of this, we say, okay, now go away and think perceptively, and let's talk about that next. Righto, when it comes to thinking perceptively, I wouldn't call myself an academic actually, but I could go on for days about ways you could think perceptively. So let's have a look at some of the things that you could pass on to your students to help them think perceptively. Now, developing ideas, adding details, that's, as I said, I think that's describe and explain, but thinking perceptively ties in more with those verbs that we use for writing: analyze and discuss. So it's taking that thinking further. We often talk about being insightful as well. That's another way that we explain things to students. But what does that mean? How do you do it? How do you do perceptive? How do you do insightful? So anyway, without further ado, here are some ideas. So obviously one of the most popular ones, pros and cons. Describe, debate the pros and the cons. Pros or cons? No, both. Consider cause and effect, especially from a speculative point of view. So before I talked about, adding details by describing how you got here in the first place, how the situation came to this point in the first place. So that background details, cause and effect is similar, but I think push students to look at the possibilities. What might happen? What might happen if? What if? So being a bit more speculative about it. Ask, so what? So, like, I ate too much chocolate, so what? Oh, well, I don't feel very well, so what? Well, you'd think I'd learn from that, so what? And you can just carry on and on and on. So what? So what happened? So what does this matter? In other words, why is this important? So the whole so what is a really it's quite a provocative way to get students thinking, because it's kind of argumentative and it's their language too. Okay, consider the perspectives of others. Look through a different lens. So here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we are blessed with Te Ao Māori, the Māori culture. And if you are not from New Zealand, look into your native culture, or if you are of that culture, big ups to you, because you have like 4D going on here. So here in New Zealand, we can look at situations through the lens of, or through discussion of, say, tūranga waiwai, your mana, moving from the darkness into the light, the importance of connections like whanaungatanga. And the cool thing about this is that it doesn't give us an extra way, apart from the Eurocentric way of looking at things. It actually gives us a whole new vocabulary, or a way of explaining things as well. So that's fantastic. Obviously, other perspectives. You could look at the wealthy, the poor, certain religions. You could look at migrants. You could look at the elderly's perspectives. So that's another way to think perceptively. Past, present, and future obviously are huge. So how something links to the past. how did the past suggest that this was going to happen? What we're experiencing now? What can we learn from the past? How does the past suggest the future? Okay, so it's that importance of the past. The present is all about looking at trends. Now, when you're in something, it's really hard to see it. So what I do is when students say, well, what do you mean the present? What's going on? I don't know. You know, in the past, this happened. We had the land wars and yada, yada, yada. And in the future, we're all going to be talking to holograms or zooming around in power packs, whatever. But in the present, it's just us. We just are. No, have them look at settings. So, you know, from the point of view of settings. So the physical setting, what's happening to our physical world? Obviously, climate change is a big thing. Animal endangerment, whatever. Things like that. Political settings, what's going on in elections, financial pressures, what else have I got here? Discrimination, laws, health, education, so that those political settings, social settings, trends, fads, look at vaping and social media and health and fitness fads and all that stuff. What's considered socially acceptable, manners, tattoos, whatever else is going on, family dynamics, what's going on with that? Okay, so if you break the present up into the types of setting, that can help them explain the trends, think trends of the present. Consider what is suggested about our future. As I mentioned before, be speculative. And again, you can think about how the past and how the present is suggesting what might eventuate. My favorite is human behavior, looking at what is suggested or what this shows about human behavior. So what have I got here? So like really, you can get in some juicy stuff and kids love it. So it's worth pushing this side of things. My default is always Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is fantastic. And then you can always move into, well, needs versus wants, that kind of thing. Our animal instincts, our ability to be reactive and protective, and I would say sensitive, but I wouldn't say that's an animal reaction. But those instant, the instant anger, that kind of thing. Well, that's that reactive thing. So animal instincts. The 7 deadly sins and the 7 heavenly virtues are brilliant for looking at human behaviors, and they basically encompass everything. So 7 deadly sins, obviously greed, sloth, envy. Greed is huge. 7 heavenly virtues: charity, diligence, kindness, patience, humility. Pathos, so you've got that sympathy, that empathy, that apathy. Who feels apathy? Why are we apathetic about this? Empathy, how can we empathize, and maybe when the students are writing, they need to be empathetic as well. So tapping into that side of things. And then there's psychology, so looking at how something is reflected in these psychological studies. So what have I got listed here? Okay. Love being blind, that's not a study, but I'm sure there's plenty of studies on it. Peer pressure, consumerism, we know all about those, but also things like Pavlov's dogs, Robber's Cave, The First Follower, that's on YouTube, the ego, the super ego, and so on. I've linked all of those in my blog. So they are fantastic for helping explain human behaviors and looking at things in a different way, and that sparks students' thinking. So plenty there to help students be perceptive, insightful, to analyze and discuss. So happy days. Should get some good writing out of that. You could always print off the list that's in the blog if you want and just take students through it. You might want to edit it a bit take out the chatty stuff. But develop your ideas, think perceptively. 2 things we often ask students to do, and they often, despite saying, okay, miss, they often don't understand what we're talking about. So you've got to unpack it. So there are some ways to unpack. Enjoy.